Hello, my name is Roy Poyan, and I'm the Director of Families Impacted by Opioids. Thank you for joining us for this next episode of Fentanyl, Families in Harm's Way. In this episode, we're going to take a look at the child safety and support services that are typically a county entity or agency across the United States. They also tend to work in tandem with foster care. If you have a loved one and they are responsible for parenting and they are themselves dealing with substance use disorders, it's very possible that those children will need to be taken care of while they're either in rehab, while they're incarcerated, or while they're just getting better, getting back on their feet. So there a couple of things could take place. You could help and step in and take the children and their care and responsibility. An extended relative could do that, or a friend, or a government agency might be required or ordered by the courts. In order that you deal with this government agency, there are things that you can get prepared for in understanding what is this government agency and how can we effectively work in tandem with them. We find that when you are in that situation dealing with these agencies, it's very much in your best interest to understand what it is they're going to be asking of you and doing it to the best of your ability. You will find a much more smoother interaction with these agencies if you don't fight with them and have them do things your way because you think that's the way they should be done. They have a process, and their process is what will rule this situation, no matter how much you fight or push against it. So approaching it with knowledge about what they're doing, why they're doing, how they're doing, what's expected of you is going to be a very valuable responsibility on your part in advance. So let's go ahead and let's go to the family table and just break open this this topic, and we'll see what you feel is important for you to take forward. And then go to your county agency and find out exactly how they do what they do. Once again, if you have somebody who's, especially, their addictions are getting worse and they're responsible for children, something's going to happen with those children. This is not a guessing game. Either you're going to take care of them or an agency is going to take care of them. Either way, you need to have a plan and you need to get an understanding of how that will take place.
At this stage in your journey, you're in a situation where support child services, or however it's titled as a county agency, either by court or in other ways referred to, and they're coming into your life. It's a real, I don't need to tell you this if you've been through it, but because you know, but for those that haven't, it's a significant disruption in everybody's life when a child has to be removed from a home, because the people who are in responsible positions have reasonably to determine a situation as such where it's not in the child's best interest to be in that location. And typically what we find, especially in the courts, is that they would rather have that child with their parents, with their family. We realize as a society, that's where the child will thrive and do the best. But if that environment is one that is threatening, the mother may be a great mother in this scenario that I'll present. In this case, she's addicted to heroin, and this has placed a lot of people who she does not know are in the home, in the house, in that child's environment. They may themselves be more nefarious or disoriented in their way of conducting themselves, that in itself creates a safety. So you might sit there and say, well, Janet, she's a good mother and she watches out for her kids even while she's taking drugs, and we don't think that the child should be removed. That may not be the case because of the company that Janet keeps. And we're not always aware when a drug deal is taking place, where's the child? Because that means that somebody else is now, engaging Janet, and something might go wrong there. And you've got this child who cannot protect themselves. So when this happens, usually the family and all the family members are very offended and defensive. Now, consider that you're a county employee and you're trained in how to help this family understand this dynamic. But you have this family who's in this like posture where they are going to do everything to counter anything that this caseworker has to say about what they have to do to change in order to justify the decision being made reverse so that they can receive back their child. And the caseworker lays out the goals and objectives, and they say to the mother, we need to see real progress where this is, and they know what to look for. They've seen all the tricks of the trade. So if you're lying, if you're cheating, if you're hiding things, they'll likely know it. And they'll comment about it. And more than likely in a defensive way, this person might say, I'm not doing that. You know, how could they think that of me? That would mean I'm a bad person, blah, blah, blah. When really they were doing it. And they just are embarrassed that they got kind of like caught up in that. The caseworker uncomfortably still has to call what they see as what they are seeing for the benefit of the child, okay? So I'm not trying to present in every case that these caseworkers are angels of mercy and they're always able to do exactly what's right. I am asking you ahead of time, in advance, that this might take place in your family, that you step back from this. Let's face it, the only reason this is happening is because this disease has taken control of this person's life, okay? And so until we can help them to manage the disease, it's not a good environment for the child. And it is in the child's best interest, maybe not the mother's, maybe not the grandparents and his aunts and uncles, but the fact is that it is in this child's best interest to be placed in some place where they're safe for a period in time until this situation improves itself. Now, what does that mean? It means that they're going to write a kind of a change plan, okay? And what you're going to try and do is to understand what the characteristics are of what they're asking of you. It's not a matter of you, I did everything you told me to do. You know, why aren't we done with this? Well, you went through the motions, but you didn't really do it, okay? So what we're asking you to consider is that you need to really do it and make it truly a part of yourself so that when we're not here, you're still doing it because this is what you honestly believe is you, and it's the way that you want things to take place in your family and your family's life. Once those are achieved and you're able to demonstrate them, then typically we do find that the replacement is then reversed, and the goal is that this person would be returned back to at least a reasonably healthy environment where everybody's trying and everyone has the concern of the child in the forefront, their best interest. So let's take a look at what's involved in the foster care or the child protection services business and what they do in their world. And let's start to understand what are the options. Well, a lot of this has to do with age. Age of the caregiver that might take this person on. You look and you say, well, my grandmother can watch them. Well, your grandmother is very old, very frail, and if the child starts to head down the stairs, she probably wouldn't be able to respond fast enough. Or she's in financial straits and really is not able to provide, that's a great place for them, the perfect place. Let's place them with, your relatives, okay? And usually that's one of their first looks at. And they determine, as we look at this, and evaluate it also, is this a viable place to place the child? But if those are not available, and if you've determined ahead of time that you're not going to do that for whatever reason, then it's only reasonable that you would learn ahead of time how to use this service to your advantage. Because let's face it, what we're doing is we're saying we want the best for the mother, the father, the family, and the child. And we're forcing, until this child gets returned to the family and back into the family system, that this family make changes for the better. because they got so off track that basically we had to kind of do a timeout. Let's first secure the safety of the child. Then second, let's help the families members to understand what they have to do in a more permanent way to make changes so that this then becomes an environment that our community and society can say it's reasonable for us to assume that this family is able to function in a way that's beneficial to everybody involved. So they'll always be evaluating you. They'll always be doing a needs assessment. They'll be coming back and asking you to show them this, show them that. They'll be looking at everything from a critical eye, okay? They're not gonna sit there and give you the benefit of the doubt, nor should they. And this is not a bad person. I mean, I'm not gonna ask you to put yourself in their role, but this is a person who's chosen to do this kind of work. God bless them. These people are overworked, underpaid. They work incredibly bad hours, often in the middle of like winter snowstorms and heat waves. And it's impossible in some cases for them to do all that's required of them on every case, just because of how understaffed they are. So the more that you could do and understand and participate that this is your plan, not theirs. When you sit down with them and they write out these goals, we're asking you to sit there and say, we own this plan now. We're not going to work against it. We're going to work for it. We might even add to it, which would be great, because then it truly is yours and it's permanent. The things that they're going to suggest are very healthy. Either way, if you do them, you'll very likely be a better family in terms of how you communicate, how you support, and how you basically live your life day in and day out. So with that in mind, drugs are not a part of that. And as long as the person is using, they're probably not going to get their child back. I've seen very few child enforcement agencies that say, oh, sure, well, she'll get off the drugs eventually. We'll go ahead and give him back, Billy. They don't do that. They don't even do it if they think like, oh, well, she's well on her way. No, this person has to prove out that they are already there and they are well into the tundra of being there before they can consider, bringing this child back into the family dynamic. So with this in mind, we're looking at, and this is really hard to digest, and I realize this, but I'm going to say it anyhow. These people are probably the best thing that can happen to you at this stage in your life, because your life is basically, if they're required to be in your house talking to you, your life is really taking a turn. And to have people that know exactly how to make the change, what an asset for you. How many times do you get that in your life? They know what you need to do to make the differences that are needed. You need to listen to them, and once they've put it down on paper, own it as yours, as though you chose to actually write these paragraphs out, set these goals, and set this criteria. Not the caseworker, you. Because once you're running your own plan, which happens to be theirs and maybe a little more that you're adding to it to make it your personal plan, then everybody's going to win. And you'll cut down the timeline that it takes to get your child back, and your whole quality of life will start to improve. Because typically the goals that they set in there are true improvements to a person's life. I want to thank you for taking the time to consider this. If you have to go through it, it's hell, but it is an improvement, and often that kind of change really makes a difference. Get your church involved if you've got a faith group, and get other people involved that can give you moral support. You're a good person trying to do the right thing, and now a government agency is getting into your life and intervening. They don't want to be there either, but they're not going to negate their responsibility of contributing to what it will take in order for you to be able to perform at a reasonable level in providing care and safety and nurturing for your child. Thank you very much. Hello, I want to thank you for continuing to view our episode. And we're now going to work into the area of the 3Ds. This is an important characteristic for the family to develop skills in. And we'll start by taking the time to look at an issue and then determine the issues based on the area of determining a solution, developing a decision, and designing a plan of action. By using your Module 3 workbook and going to a specific issue, you'll be able to find that the first step in that 3D skill set is the FTR, the Family Transformational Model. And the Family Transformational Model is a set-up way, each time the same way, that we will take 5 categories to look at in determining a solution. And each category is going to have 3 questions. So let's get started. The first is to define the issue. Naturally, we'll want to know what the issue is. The word issue is really problem, but we're saying the word issue is, the reason we're saying the word issue is it's just a little bit easier to digest, because it's not always a problem. Sometimes it's just something that's happening and we need to determine a solution to it. The next question is, how does the issue impact the family? We need to know that. We need to know we have an issue, that's fine. The issues can exist, but if it's impacting the family, in what way is it impacting the family? And then what steps can the family take to prepare and then respond to the issue? That's very important for us to know. The fact is that this issue exists and it's impacting the family. We tend to believe maybe there was something we could have done to kind of get ready for it. And if there was, then we would want to have taken those steps, which is what all these episodes are about. And then who can help assist us and the family in our response? So we want to start to ask ourselves, we know that there's an issue, we know that it's impacting the family, and there are things that we could do to prepare for this, but we're probably going to need a resource, information, another person outside of our family, or maybe one of our family members specifically can use their functionality and contribute. So we want to identify that. And then what should the family expect as their outcome? And kind of a start with the end in mind thought, where we're saying, if we're going to do something, it's going to result in something. So is that result desirable? Is that really what we want? Because if we're going to create a solution, then we want the solution's outcome to be what we expect it would be. So in each of these categories that I just described, 1 through 5, there are 3 questions, and we're going to ask ourselves each of these. Let's go back into the first category, define the issue. Clearly state what happened or what will happen. We want to know very clearly what happened or what's likely to happen. And then write that down. Identify who's involved or who should be involved, and then what would you like to have happen or like to see happen. The third question in every category is going to be used. You'll see how in just a minute. But just remember, the third question in every category, so this question right here, the way you answer it, will be reused. Now the next question is, how is the issue impacting the family? Who in the family exactly is impacted? In what way are they impacted? And then the third question is, what is needed to move forward? And then the third category is, what steps can the family take to prepare and then respond to the issue? The 3 questions again. What needs to be done? And then prioritize that list. Who needs to be involved? And then what will it look like, the third question, what will it look like when completed? Then the 4th category is, who can help and assist the family in their response? The 3 questions are, how to search and organize this organization to help you. In other words, it's not enough that you know you're going to go and introduce yourselves to a treatment center in your community. You want to start to determine, how do I look for them and organize my way of seeking help, because it might not just be that group alone. You may also need other services to kind of start to create a who can assist us. And it may be many different types of people. What to ask from them, and then what to expect. Remember the third question, what to expect. And then the fifth category is, what should the family expect as their outcome? Well, that has to do a lot with timing. And if it takes a certain amount of time, let's be realistic of what that is. That has something to do with the expense of the involvement, of getting involved in this issue. And then the third question being required changes, our changes as family members, for this response to successfully take place. Now, let's state what our solution is. Hey, this is the great news. You've already developed your solution. By answering each of these three questions, the third question in every category, you'll pull forward now into your statement. So your first sentence of your statement is the third answer in the first category. What would you like to have happen or like to see happen? Well, that becomes your first sentence. So what your first sentence for your solution statement is, what we would like to see happen is, and you just pull your answer from there to here. Do the same thing with the second category. How does the issue impact the family? Using the third question's answer, what is needed for the family to move forward? So now your second sentence is, what's needed to move forward is, and now you're accumulating these answers from these categories, the third question, and it's actually becoming your first sentence, your second sentence, your third sentence, your fourth sentence, and your fifth sentence in your solution statement. So your solution statement is going to sound something like, what we would like to see happen is, and what's needed to move forward will be, and then the third question from the third category, what it will look like when completed will be, and then what we expect will be, and then what's required for us to have a successful response is. Now those are your 5 sentences. You've just constructed your solution. And this is how you go back using a model for creating a solution. For any issue in life you have to face, you can use this as a way of approaching it. Now let's go to the other area, which is the second coping skill, making a decision. Let's make a value-based decision. Let's make a decision each time that kind of balances with what we value most. So first we want to determine, what are our values? Well, the best way to do that is to write down on a piece of paper, what types of things do you as an individual value most? And each member of your family can do this in a kind of a group exercise. And then once you've done that, I value love, I value honesty, I value relationships and sharing. These could all be an individual's 1, 2, 3. Then prioritize them. Which of the 1, 2, 3 is most important? Then have each member of the family do the same thing. And then you can sit there and say to the family, what was your number 1? What was your number 2? What was your number 1? What was your number 1? What was your number 1? And then what was your 2? What was your 2? What was your 3? What was your 3? And where you start to see many people in the family say, well, my number 1 is relationships, my number 2 was trust, and my number 3 was love. Well, then you talk to another person, they say, well, my number 1 was love, my number 2 was personal expression or confidentiality, or so they mentioned something different, but they did mention love. And then the third member of the family happens to mention love also. You know now that love is a value of the family. So whatever decision you make, you want to balance it on the fact of, does this disrupt our values? If it does, at least you know that it does, and to what degree. You're calculating that. But at least also you're including, what do we value most? Let's make sure our decisions don't counter that. And now, in the first step, we're going to identify exactly what's happened. And this is, by the way, in your book, okay? And it is for each of the episodes. Now, identify exactly what's happened what happened, how did it happen, who did it happen to. Then the second step is analyze the situation, assess the problem, identify the problem, and in what areas did the problem create an impact. You're writing all of these down. The third step of that the third step in the decision-making model is what is the number of one contributing factor? What is causing this issue to take place? You need to know that before you make a decision. The fourth step is, now that you know the number one factor, you need to go out and find out what information there is about this. Your primary source, you're going to go to the actual person or organization that's involved with this and ask them, what is this issue, and help us to understand it better. The secondary source would be somebody's telling you this happened, or somebody suggests that you should do something a certain way, and it's coming from somebody else other than the primary source. It could be an article, a clinical paper. These are all secondary sources, and you gather them and you make them part of your primary, secondary information gathering. The third area that you look at is your gut. What does your gut, because that's often where our faith comes in, and other things that are very important when making decisions get included. So trust your gut is what we're saying in the decision-making process. The fifth step in making a good quality decision is where you're taking a criteria and saying, let's take what we're going to make a decision about and let's balance it on the criteria to make sure that we're covering all of our bases. And this will ensure safety of your loved one. Is safety a part of what's being considered? And do we have the resources that are needed to do the decision we're looking at? And then do we understand the timetable? Is it realistic? And do we understand the negative impacts? Because every decision has a positive and negative. Well, identify what the negative outcomes might be so that you can weight the factor of, is this a good decision? And then would you do this would you ask others to do this if they were doing it for you? Meaning it was done for you or to you. Is this still a good decision? These are all areas that you want to take a look at. The third coping skill is in the area of the family plan of action. And everybody could say, well, Roy, listen, we're just going to go out and do it. Well, it's going to get done a lot more effectively. I want to warn you that the addiction industry is not organized. And then again, either is the family. So you're taking two disorganized organizations and you're putting them together. So a plan is a very good idea. The other factor is you're going to more than likely require the assistance of a lot of different groups. And as time goes by, those groups are going to change. And now it's a whole new set of groups that you're dealing with. When you're at the hospital, the ER, that's what that is. Then you move over to detox, that's what that is. Then you move over to therapy and treatment, and that lasts for 16 weeks. That's what that is. Then you're looking at sober living, recovery, maybe incarceration, and then reentry, on all that's involved in that. So there's all sorts of reasons why a plan put on paper based on the decision and the information gathering that you've made, based on the solution that you want to use, are very good ideas. It all comes together with the plan of action. Then you take the plan of action and you go find a professional to help you. Everything that we've done up to now is to position you to a place where you can be properly assisted and directed and supported. This is what's often missing in the families. This is what exhausts the families. This is where the families get into fights internally on. So, for that reason, we're going to apply the 3D coping skills. Determine a solution. We're going to develop a decision, and we're going to design a plan of action. And we're going to do it each time. I hope this is helpful for you. I'm confident it will be.